Hello, it's Scott Manley here with episode 91 of Interstellar Quest. Now, we have some technology which we haven't really exploited in the form of the infrared telescope. There is a specific mode where you can fly this out to something like 500 AU. It's basically 10 times the distance of Joule, and from there you can use the gravitational effects of the sun, or Kerbal, to act as a lens and let you survey the sky in unprecedented detail. Of course, getting there to get all that beautiful science takes quite a lot of patience or a very fast rocket. I was, of course, impatient. I took my existing deep space ferry, deep space shuttle, took off the crew capsule, gave it a little more fuel, attached a telescope and some cooling stuff, and I'm more or less lifting straight off and heading towards deep space as fast as this thing will let me. So this thing is majestically riding a fusion-powered flame off to oblivion. But before it goes there, we want to actually ditch the fairings. After all, we don't want to carry them with us or leave them in deep space. To make sure they cleanly separate, I spin the whole thing up and then let those fly away. Once they're clear, we can throttle up again and continue on our path. And we have quite a long way to go. As I said, 550 AU, although it is Kerbal AU, so it's slightly different. 550 AU is about 3 light days, slightly more than that. It is a long trip, and in my haste to get there, I realised that I had left on the life support gear. Yes, I have life support of food, water and oxygen for a crew, which this thing isn't carrying with me. So dump that out and then continue on my way out to 550 AU, or in Kerbal terms, about 7.5 billion kilometres. It's probably longer than you've ever had need to fly in Kerbal Space Program. I mean, it's a ridiculously long distance by most Kerbal scales. Rough calculations say that to get out there in 100 days, I would have to travel at about 800 and something kilometers per second. I'll be lucky to get 80, but I had a cunning plan to maximize my fuel efficiency by throttling very, very low and pretty much leaving it running overnight. When I came back the next morning, the engine was still running, at least it looked like it was still running, but my velocity was stuck at about 20 kilometers per second. I had run out of tritium in my reactor. I still had tritium in the engine, but pumping it to the reactor wouldn't help because you needed plenty of megajoules to kick the reactor off, and the cooling system that was needed for the liquid helium was taking more electrical power than I actually had. So it's essentially dead in space, but it is the first interstellar spacecraft in the Interstellar series. Anyway, anticipating another week between launches, I built this rig to make sure that I had extra tritium. So I have 8 reactors there, all sitting generating tritium, which will, of course, fly my spacecraft. On Earth, we breed tritium in reactors. Essentially, you wrap it with lithium, and lithium-6, if it absorbs a neutron, I believe it will then fission into a helium nuclei and tritium, and ultimately the tritium will decay into helium-3, which has its own magnificent uses. So yes, this thing is going to sit for a week generating tritium, and hopefully it will be able to carry us all the way to the edge of the Kerbal system. We've also added an extra nuclear reactor on board, a fission reactor in the nose cone, and we've got rid of that life support stuff because we don't really need it, it's dead weight. Well, after that rather embarrassing launch failure, it's good that we've got something that's reliable. Tested, we've been to Minmus and back, and now we're going to head to Eve. Just going to make sure, yeah, the reactor is... It appears that it breeds tritium by default. That's great. Let's close this thing up, fire up the engine, and we are going to get ready to go. Whoop. Oh, no, wait a second. Okay, we're fine. Just straighten this thing up. Yes, that was not quite the best way to do things, but you know, okay, well, don't explode. I'm thinking I should abort, but you know what, I think I can use this as a ramp to help me get in the air. Watch this. Ready, and bingo! I don't think that was supposed to have quite as much explosion as that. What happened? Oh yeah, my reactor exploded. Great. So, I'm not actually getting any thrust from this thing. And some more stuff's exploding. Oh yes, yes. This is why you should never be afraid to call a launch abort if things aren't quite going according to plan. Okay, I gotta turn this to try and land it safely somewhere. So gear is down, bay is open, and no, come on, turn. I don't want to land in the water at this rate. Oh, no. I'm stalling, and pushing down is not working. I'm totally out of this thing. Okay, I think time to say bye-bye. Bye-bye. There it goes. I like how they're flying around without helmets and deployed parachute. They are safe. And from their vantage point on the shore, they get to watch the landing gear fly off to infinity, skipping around playfully. Or perhaps it's their mating dance, or perhaps they're just going to go off and explore the oceans. Who knows? Oh well, with the second launch disaster in the week, it's time to actually do something useful. We still have, of course, the Highlander on Minmus, and we would like to get some instrumental science from all the other biomes that we've missed. We actually visited the slopes biome before. The slopes biome, well, I'm guessing this is a slope. It says so according to the map. It does look like this one is a little steep, but honestly, we have plenty of fuel to deal with this. We can refuel once we land on the surface. So I decided that I was going to very carefully sit this thing down on the slope and have it hold attitude. Now I don't want to land on it too fast because as soon as those touch, they will generate a torque in my spacecraft which will make it slide down the slope. Anyway, I'm sure old me had something fascinating to say about this. Now this is going to be quite a delicate maneuver. I've just got to touch the landing legs on the slope, and I want to keep my vertical velocity as low as possible because if we turn too much, it'll make it hard. Okay, see that? Now we don't want to slide down the slope. Observe the materials bay. Low temperature has frozen one of the liquid samples into a sort of ice cream. Was it green before? No, of course it wasn't. The goo looks hungry, very hungry. It should eat the materials bay then, because that looks like ice cream. Okay, what else do we get? We have a crew report. Don't fall over! Don't fall over! It's perfect, it knows exactly what to say. Don't fall over. Low temperature, frozen. Yeah, we've seen that. Sensors picking up stuff. It's very cold here. I think we collected a lot of this stuff already. If you remember, we slung the instrumentation on a Kerbal's back and had him fly up the slope. So I think most of these we already have on more than one occasion. So let's see what we can get. And with one more confirmation of my suspicion that it is very cold here, I think it's time for us to go sideways down the slope, land, and just make sure that we have all the info we need. I'm pretty sure we have EVA information, but I decided to land at the bottom of the slope to make sure the data's all ready and we've got refueled and everything. So we'll sit there. And while we're waiting for the spacecraft to refuel, one of the Kerbals stepped out to do some experiments related to ragdolls falling down slopes in low gravity. Actually, I honestly think that he's trying to invent a new sport here. It does seem rather fun, and he does have a smile on his face through most of this, which really, I'm pretty sure this Kerbal must have the badass trait. Either that or he's incredibly stupid and enjoys spinning around, because that's all he does here. Oh, yes. Since the payload limitations made things like chess and checkers unavailable, apparently the simpler things are what these Kerbals enjoy. Oh, look at him. Laying down flat, taking a look at the sky. Oh no, he's rolled over onto his side again. Have you stopped now? Are you ready to get up? I need you to plant a flag. We need a flag to commemorate this grand occasion. I think we should also name this Seanlock Slope for his discovery and invention of a new sport. Now that space travel is becoming cheap, people will fly up here for recreational purposes. I think I've invented a new sport. Yay. And you will just be the first of many. And now, a week later, we're finally able to launch our nuclear fusion powered rocket on its deep space mission. I believe we've more than doubled the tritium reserves on this spacecraft. Although I suspect that if we take a really long time that some of our tritium might actually decay into helium-3. I'm not sure how that's going to affect my ultimate delta V, but I do know that we're going to follow the same launch profile as before. And of course you know how this goes. Fold out the radiators, jettison the fairing, accelerate for an ungodly amount of time, and thankfully you guys get to all watch it at 12 times regular speed. But I had to sit it in the background while I was mucking around with Crusader Kings. And you know what? Because I ended up playing Crusader Kings while letting my rockets burn, I'm now completely addicted to that game, and that's why there was no video today. Okay, I jest. I was actually at a party all last night and therefore couldn't do any voiceovers, but yeah, Crusader Kings 2 is one of these things that just sucks my life, and I don't know if any people would actually be interested in watching me play it, because I am into science rather than history, and therefore probably don't have nearly the level of knowledge of strategy game mechanics compared to many of the better players out there. Anyway, point is, to maximize my delta V, I have to thrust at a low level so that you get the highest specific impulse, and then, yeah, you run it at 4 times regular speed. You appreciate the fact that you're flying past the moon at about 7 or 8 kilometers per second. And while that would be a high velocity for most spacecraft, this is probably 10% of what we'd actually like to do, given the distance that we have to travel before we can really exploit the gravitational lensing of Kerbal. If you're wondering, this isn't really a new idea to use the sun as a gravitational lens for a telescope. This actually goes back, 20 odd years. This has been seriously studied. That's how they know, 550 AU or 7.5 billion kilometers. A smart person has sat down and actually derived these things, tried to come out with a reasonable mission that would do it. Certainly it's not a space mission that will be flown anytime soon. If you're going out that far, you need to have your really high velocities. And for comparison, after travelling for more than 30 years, Voyager 1 is at about 130 AU from the Sun. So on paper, you're talking about a mission which would take over a century just to get in position so it could start returning good data. This, however, is travelling at 70 kilometers per second, and we'll get there in just over 100 days. So in the meantime, we shut down the main fusion reactor. We have a little fission reactor there. You can just see it underneath in the lattice work between the main engine component and the telescope component at the top. It's just hidden in there, a tiny 0.625 meter fission reactor, which will keep it ticking over for the next, 4 months or so. And now back in Kerbal, the John Patrick Mason is ready to go. This is a slightly modified version, you'll notice, because of the problems with the engine smashing into the ground. I decided to add some little skids there on the back to absorb the force and perhaps make sure that that if it lands, that it doesn't end up dragging the tail along the ground and losing it. Because if they land on Eve and they lose their engine, that would be particularly bad. We don't want them to get stuck there. So yes, we are flying, able to lift up at... Oh, crap, we just lost the skids. Oh, okay, well, so much for that grand plan. Oh well, let's just keep going. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? That we get stuck on Eve and have to send someone else? Well, I guess we could get stuck with only 12 hours of life support. That might be bad. Point being, if we have to eject because of some aerodynamic problem, there probably won't be anything left of the spacecraft, and the crew will be stuck with 12 hours of life support. And it might be possible to get one of these things there in 12 hours. It might be fun to try, but right now we're just going to be a little less aggressive. The good news, at least, is the launch is going well. Well, I guess we must be moving up at about 300 meters per second, I would guess, or climb angle is approaching 30 degrees, and our forward velocity is now 700 and it's going fast. We're going to get to space in this alright. The only danger is that we might perhaps have to deploy the coolers before we continue to burn into orbit. Sonzen and Durdos Kerman probably love the performance of this thing. It's as if you don't really need to worry about fuel anymore, which is probably why I managed to mess up that particular launch to the edge of the solar system, because I was thinking that it was far too easy. It's good to have a legitimate mistake every now and then, just to keep me on my toes, keep me thinking. Perhaps even supply some cheap laughs to people who like to see things going wrong, because hey, it's Kerbal Space Program. When things are going wrong, that's when things are most entertaining. Anyway, we have succeeded in hitting orbital velocity. Apoapsis is going to be 105 kilometers, and once we've circularized this, we're going to plot a very aggressive trajectory to bring us to Eve. I'm pretty sure if I do this right, I'll be able to get there in about 10 days, and that will include enough fuel to slow down, land, take off, and then come back, again flying very, very aggressively. So plotting the orbit, well, you see that Eve was slightly ahead of us. You can see, yeah, there it is, slightly ahead of us. So what you want to do is pretty much come straight down and then fly by on a hyperbolic trajectory and hopefully catch Eve as it moves around the sun. The good news from this angle is that Eve is actually moving kind of laterally very slowly, so it should be quite easy to find the exact location. Of course, the second question is whether I can actually fly the intercept trajectory, but we'll find that out when time comes. What is interesting is the maneuver node controls. They do seem to have an upper limit to the speed at which they work. They, if you're trying to scroll up through 10 kilometers, it just seems very, very, very insensitive. The funny thing is that this super aggressive transfer orbit that'll get us there in about 10 days or so, the delta V is less than 8 kilometers per second, which means it's comparable to getting into Earth orbit. Escaping Earth orbit will be like another 3 to 4 kilometers per second, so, this is aggressive in the Kerbal universe, but it's actually pretty normal for our current space technology. However, if we had this kind of engine, our missions would be so much more impressive. We would have so much more awesome things to do. But yes, we of course break orbit, accelerate upwards, and watch Kerbin fall away from behind us. Durdos and Sonzen ask Mission Control why they don't have a mirror to watch behind them, because they really would like to see Kerbin leaving behind them. Instead, they have to get told, yes, it's going to be getting smaller, but we didn't give you any cameras, so you just have to imagine it in your head, getting smaller as you thrust away from it. Yes, you're professionals, just keep the rocket pointed in the right direction. And yeah, right direction was a little easier said than done, because of course I wanted to maximize my fuel efficiency, which meant that my thrust wasn't super high, so I kind of had to guess my way through what would actually lead to the correct exit vector. So despite the velocity vector being, the velocity vector or the nav ball vector pointing in one direction, what I'm really trying to do is adjust it so that my escape vector on the map is the correct direction that we're aiming for. Because if you get those close together with roughly the same velocity, that will be a better measure than that blue marker that is on the nav ball, which is based upon a thrust event which happened in low Kerbin orbit, rather than perhaps what the final outcome is that we want for this. That might actually be a really good idea for a mod, that if you generate a maneuver node which is built around hitting an escape vector, then it will pin the maneuver calculation to that escape vector rather than the point at which the thrust was supposed to happen. I mean, we all know that maneuver nodes are the epitome of sensitive to, initial conditions. And if you don't quite get them right, then your changes have to be compounded and you have to keep on correcting. So a more ideal system would take your destinations, your close approaches, your future maneuver nodes, and use those to kind of backwards correct as you had errors. As errors crept into your orbit, they would self-correct, and you would have a much better system. But hey, what I did was I waited until I was out of the sphere of influence of Kerbal and made another maneuver to correct my course, and now I am on my way to Eve in 11 days' time. But until the next time, I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.